March 26, 1883. Fifth Avenue glitters with unprecedented splendor as 1,000 carriages roll toward the most spectacular mansion New York has ever seen. Inside the French Renaissance palace, crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows while servants make final preparations for the century's most audacious social gambit. A woman stands at the grand staircase, surveying her battlefield with calculating eyes tonight. She conquers New York society or faces utter humiliation. This is Alva Vanderbilt, and she has just declared war on America's most powerful social queen, the formidable Mrs. Caroline Astor herself. What happens in the next few hours will either crown her the undisputed ruler of Gilded Age society or destroy her forever. But this story begins in the humid streets of Mobile, Alabama, where young Alva Smith first learned the brutal art of survival. Born into wealthy Southern aristocracy in 1853, she watched her father's fortune crumble during Reconstruction while neighbors whispered about their declining status. The lesson burned into her young mind like a brand. Money could disappear, but strategic intelligence and ruthless ambition were forever. Her family fled north to New York, refugees from collapsed Confederate aristocracy, carrying little more than pride and burning determination. In Manhattan drawing rooms, young Alva discovered a new battlefield where social position mattered more than military victories or lost plantations. She studied the rules with military precision, cataloging every slight, every snub, every invisible barrier separating established elite from ambitious newcomers. The grand ballrooms became her war college as she learned to read power dynamics in glances, identifying allies and enemies across rooms. But knowledge alone wasn't enough. She needed a weapon, and that weapon came in William Kissam Vanderbilt, heir to America's greatest fortune. The Vanderbilt name carried immense wealth but fatal social stigma. They were new money in a world worshipping old money with fervor. When Alva married William in 1875, she wasn't just gaining a husband but acquiring the ammunition needed to assault society's highest fortress. Yet even Vanderbilt millions couldn't buy acceptance from Mrs. Caroline Astor, the undisputed empress of New York's social hierarchy and keeper. Mrs. Astor's power was absolute. Her approval meant admission to society's inner circle, while disapproval condemned families to permanent exile. For years, Alva endured the ultimate humiliation, being ignored by the one woman whose recognition she desperately craved despite her wealth. The established families viewed Vanderbilts as crude railroad barons, too recently risen from working-class origins to deserve consideration among true aristocrats. But Alva possessed something her tormentors lacked: a brilliant strategic mind sharpened by years of social combat and unbreakable ambition. She began planning her assault on Mrs. Astor's fortress with military campaign precision, identifying weaknesses and plotting her ultimate victory. The first phase involved architecture. She commissioned Richard Morris Hunt to design the most magnificent mansion America had ever seen. The French Renaissance chateau rose like a declaration of war, its limestone walls making every neighboring mansion look shabby by comparison. While construction progressed, Alva studied her enemies' weaknesses, discovering that Mrs. Astor's daughter desperately wanted to attend fashionable parties throughout the city. The trap was set with exquisite subtlety. Alva would host the most spectacular ball in New York history, but Mrs. Astor wouldn't receive invitation. When society whispered about the coming celebration, Mrs. Astor's daughter found herself in an impossible position, excluded from the season's most important event. Social pressure mounted as every other prominent family received coveted invitations while the Astors remained conspicuously absent from the guest list. The genius of Alva's strategy became clear. She had forced a social queen into the humiliating position of acknowledging a Vanderbilt first. On March 23rd, just 3 days before the ball, Mrs. Caroline Astor's carriage rolled up to the Vanderbilt mansion in unprecedented capitulation. The mighty social empress stepped down from her carriage, walked up those marble steps, and left her calling card formal surrender signal. Within hours, the Astor invitation was delivered, and Alva had achieved what no amount of money alone could have accomplished: recognition. The night of March 26, 1883 would forever be remembered as the moment when American society's power structure shifted on its foundations. As 10 o'clock struck, Fifth Avenue transformed into a river of light as nearly 1,200 guests arrived in the most extravagant costumes. Police held back crowds of curious onlookers who strained to catch glimpses of New York's elite dressed as historical figures and exotic royalty. Inside the mansion, Alva moved through her guests like a victorious general surveying conquered territory, greeting each arrival with perfect grace. The electric lights, still a marvel of technology, illuminated costumes worth fortunes as society's most powerful figures paid homage to their queen. Mrs. Astor herself appeared in magnificent court dress, her presence at the ball serving as public acknowledgement that Alva Vanderbilt had won. The ball's splendor was beyond anything New York had ever witnessed, with decorations costing millions in today's currency scattered throughout the palace. Professional dancers performed elaborate quadrilles while guests dined on delicacies imported from Europe, the entire spectacle demonstrating Vanderbilt power and sophistication. By dawn, when the last guests departed, Alva had accomplished the impossible she had forced America's most exclusive social circle to accept. But victory brought new challenges as Alva discovered that conquering society was only the beginning of her ambitions for power and recognition. She turned her attention to daughter Consuelo, viewing the girl as her ultimate masterpiece and the key to establishing a Vanderbilt dynasty. With the same ruthless calculation that had conquered Mrs. Astor, Alva began arranging Consuelo's marriage to the Duke of Marlborough, regardless of feelings. The young woman became a pawn in her mother's grand strategy, her happiness sacrificed on the altar of Alva's relentless pursuit. When Consuelo resisted the arranged marriage, Alva deployed emotional manipulation and threats that would have made medieval royalty proud of their techniques. She locked her daughter in her room, withheld food, and used every psychological weapon at her disposal until Consuelo finally submitted. The 1895 wedding at St. Thomas Church was Alva's crowning triumph. Her daughter was now a duchess, elevating the Vanderbilt name. But success came at a terrible cost, as Consuelo's misery in her loveless marriage became society gossip, and critics whispered about maternal cruelty. Alva herself seemed to recognize the price of her victories when she shocked society by divorcing William Vanderbilt, scandalizing the world. She married Oliver Belmont, another wealthy man who could support her increasingly expensive lifestyle and growing political ambitions beyond social dominance. Her interests shifted toward women's suffrage, where she applied the same strategic brilliance that had conquered Mrs. Astor to political equality. But even as she fought for women's rights, critics noted the irony of a woman who had ruthlessly controlled her daughter. Alva's later years were spent building more mansions, hosting more parties, and wielding the social power she had fought desperately to achieve. She became exactly what she had always aspired to be, a queen of American society whose word could make or break careers. Yet the cost of her rise was written in broken relationships, family estrangements, and a reputation for ruthlessness that admirers couldn't ignore. Her daughter Consuelo eventually divorced the Duke of Marlborough and found happiness in a second marriage, finally escaping her mother's controlling influence. Alva continued hosting elaborate gatherings at her various mansions, each event designed to reinforce her position as America's premier social arbiter. She understood better than anyone that in Gilded Age society, power was performed rather than simply possessed, requiring constant displays of wealth. Her Newport mansion, Marble House, became another monument to her triumph over the forces that had tried to keep Vanderbilts from acceptance. The Chinese tea house she built on the grounds served as a private retreat where she could plan her next campaigns. Even in old age, Alva remained a formidable figure who commanded respect and fear in equal measure from New York's social elite. Her funeral in 1933 drew crowds of mourners who had both admired and feared her during her decades of social dominance. Newspapers struggled to capture the complexity of a woman who had been both social revolutionary and domestic tyrant, visionary leader and mother. She had transformed American society by proving that strategic intelligence could overcome birth and bloodlines, that new money could buy acceptance. Her legacy was written in the very structure of American high society, which she had permanently altered through sheer force of will. The mansions she built still stand as monuments to her ambition, their grandeur testament to what one determined woman could accomplish. Her influence extended far beyond social circles into politics and women's rights, where her organizational skills and strategic thinking advanced causes. Yet historians continue debating whether Alva Vanderbilt was a pioneering feminist or simply a woman who used others to achieve ambitions. The truth, like most aspects of her complex character, probably contains elements of both interpretations, making her story endlessly fascinating. Her transformation from Southern refugee to social empress remains one of the most remarkable examples of American social mobility and thinking. She proved that in America, even the most entrenched hierarchies could be conquered by someone with sufficient intelligence, determination, and willingness. The ruthless rise of Alva Vanderbilt changed not just her own fate, but the entire landscape of American high society forever. Her story serves as both inspiration and warning about the costs of unbridled ambition and the price of social climbing in worlds. She remains the undisputed queen of the Gilded Age, a woman who refused to accept limitations and carved out her empire through will. Alva Vanderbilt conquered society, built palaces, and ruled with an iron fist, the ultimate example of American ambition unleashed without restraint.